12 o'clock, and we're going to call the November 15th, 2024 meeting to order. And Sharon, if you'd make note that we actually have all three of the Finance Committee members in the room.
Well,
That's the first time since, they put it. So that's good. We have our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda. Second it.
The motion or agenda is approved. Public participation. Is there anybody in the room or online who wants to address the Finance Committee? Hearing and seeing none. We have the October 17, 2024 minutes in front of us. Is there a motion for the minutes?
Second.
Great. Minutes are approved. Joe, before we get to the CFO report, do you want to introduce Mr. Cave?
Yes, I'd like to introduce Charles Cade. So this is, we found Chuck through B, so the Brown Sickle candidates. He stood out for multiple reasons. He has great experience. He's worked in hospitals for a long time. But what really stood out for us when we interviewed him was just he had a great personality. We thought he'd be a good fit for the team, and he's come in and exceeded those expectations. So he's been a great fit.
Great. Well, welcome, Chuck. We're glad to have you. Chuck is from Texas, so we know he's a good guy. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chuck, for the CFO report.
Okay, so if you want to follow along with me on page 4, starting with the income statement, we've noted that September inpatient revenues were 11% lower than the prior month, and that some of the decreases were in mental health, medical surgical floor, and RRC. We saw a decreased average daily census in med surg of 27% over the prior month, RRC 52%, which we know is expected, and the mental health unit at 9.5% for the month. And remember, the month was a day shorter, so there's a 3% already built in there. Contractual bad debt write-offs were 46.9% of gross revenue, which was below the 13-month average of 48%. Y'all have a fantastic collection percent here. That is well above most hospitals that I've seen. The result of that was a net revenue that totaled $11.7 million and exceeded our rolling month, which was $11 million. Major variations in expense are similar to what we saw in August. Contract labor, physician contracts, and rentals and leases. Contract labor was $199,000 over budget because of the ongoing use of contract employees, which we're still increasing our savings on a month-to-month basis. Physician contracts were $321,000 over budget, primarily due to anesthesia not being budgeted, and rentals and leases were $36,000 over budget, and that's because of the rental of sub-surgery equipment. Net gain or loss for the hospital in the month of September was positive $576,000. The rolling 13-month average per month was a monthly loss of $347,000. So we did much better than we started. On the balance sheet, our unrestricted cash increased from the prior month. The increase is due to a couple of things: timing of payables and timing of our payroll, as well as some increases in collections during the month. Primarily our collections and our accrued expenses impacted the balance sheet, the cash in the balance sheet by about $1 million. Net accounts receivable decreased over the month over month from 31.6 to 30.7 million. And for the month of September, WFC had 1.32 million of net operating revenues on 1.56 million of gross revenue. And from an expenditure standpoint, contract labor continues to be the driver of cost at WFC, but we anticipate that that's going to continue to increase month to month with the addition of CNAs from the most recent CNA class, similar to what we talked about in August. On a bottom line basis, WFC had an operating income of $368,000. Of course, that doesn't take into account the fact that that most of their administrative costs are dealt with by the hospital. If you want to move on with me to page 6. Page 6 is our comparison to budget. As we talked about a little bit, our census was down. Overall census was down in the month of September from prior month and for budget. So we varied from budget in terms of our gross revenue of almost 7%. Outpatient revenue was down, and outpatient revenue was down in just about every department. There were a couple of departments that had positive census from the prior month, but most of all, the census in the outpatient areas followed inpatient census, and they were down as well. Ending up at a $23 million gross patient revenue, exceeding our budget of $22 million. As we talked about before, our contractual allowances at 44.8%, total $10.3 million, a little bit below budgeted amounts. Our net patient revenue at $12.8 million exceeded our net patient revenue budget by $700,000. Total operating revenue again exceeded by $1.1 million. What's the differences in other operating revenue? And then if we go to our expenses for the month, we can see that we're pretty tight on salaries and wages. We're doing what we budgeted to do. Physician wages were below budget by 29%. Contract labor still exceeding budget fairly substantially, but being monitored regularly and coming down. Employee benefits below budget by almost $500,000. The
Question while we're on.
Yeah, can you pause?
yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
absolutely.
Thank you. On physician wages, we usually don't see that from month to month. And budget, is that related to some of the reductions that we've made in programs, particularly Boston RRC, or is that,
I'm gonna have to lean on Joe for that
okay.
answer.
So we did have, obviously, we had a reduction as a nurse practitioner in the month, I believe. If you look at the average over the last 3 months, we've been consistent this year to date. So the change to budget happened in the prior year between when we budgeted and when we started this. So I think that's accurate statement. Pretty close to the last 3 months, we've been real consistent.
And so why are benefits so much lower than budget though? That's
I go back to the methodology of budget. We did a budget for this whole hospital in a spreadsheet. So we categorized each line item and tried to associate right. And I think it was just categorization during our budgeting process. I'm gonna chalk it up to that. So I expected salaries and wages to be less also. But I think we miscategorized some of the costs.
I mean, the thing you worry about when you see something like that is a missed accrual.
I've looked at what line up over the last 2 months before Chuck got here, and it's been pretty steady the last 3 months as well. And that's all system generated stuff through the payroll module.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Related to that, to budgeting and in particular, employee costs, will the new system give us greater insight and accuracy in the budgeting process?
Because as you go through the NetSuite project, it's a one-to-one. So as you enter those line items, it flows exactly where the expense should be on your income statement. So it's mapped exactly the same way as you go through the budgeting process. So we should see this in future years once we start using that budgeting module.
Yeah, Doug was just telling me in a meeting before we came, it's like, by the time you chisel with your chisel into the rock that is our current Meditech system, there's not a lot of, data you can pull out of there. So it can only go up,
Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any thoughts on why med-surg was down much?
That,
I'd probably say it's a direct correlation with cruise season ending. We typically see that until about December, and then it starts climbing in, then it'll drop towards Christmas, and it'll start climbing, and it stays pretty consistent throughout the following summer. That would probably be my guess. We're just not seeing the volume that it did.
Alaska is different than any place I've ever been. But it is typical for census to roll seasonally year to year about the same. So it's a seasonal.
When I looked at 2023, though, it was even down from that.
Let's look, we got it right here.
It's also okay to say, I'll follow up with you later on this year. To put down this spot.
Well, the revenue is certainly up from last year, but we can do that. We can follow up the census.
You want to ask your mammo bump too?
Oh, yes. There was a big bump in the mammography. And I didn't know if like October, November was mammography month.
October. Cancer. Yeah. And the other thing is they had to take down mammography to put in the, to get it ready for the contrast enhanced mammography. So they really did a campaign to push people in to get their mammos done sooner than later. And
Oh,
that
gotcha.
project's in place now. Yeah. So they had quite a bit of mammos at the end of October.
It'll be down in November.
Go ahead, Chad.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the only other real significant variances in the expense side were physician contracts, which we talked about. There are a couple of contracts that were not budgeted. And other expenses, which was positive. So we get down to the bottom line, and our net income for the months was $945,000 versus a budget of negative $679. So I'm always happy when the bottom line is positive.
You and us both.
If you want to move on to page,
Maybe before, just to dwell on page 6 at the bottom there. So we are year to date through September, we're sitting on a $4.4 million positive bottom line compared to a net loss last year of $2.7 million. So am I reading those numbers right, Chuck?
you are reading this correctly, yes.
So that's a $7 million turnaround in the first quarter of the year. That's accurate.
So,
That's some good work.
Yeah, I think we'll see that number widen as we go into October. Because if you remember last year, we lost $1 million to $2 million over the next, like in October, November, December of 2020.
Yeah,
We're in a much better place this year.
yes.
Chuck's first report's much easier than the first report I get.
That's good. I still feel like I'm wading in a little bit.
Yeah, last year, Joe was wishing he had a 45 in his pocket.
If we move on to page 7, the numbers are obviously similar. The addition of wildflower,
Wow.
WFC.
Fire.
WFC. Again, we exceeded, or we were below budget on the inpatient side. Over budget on the outpatient side, over budget on in total patient revenue. Total patient revenue after RRC and behavioral health, physician revenue, 22 million, so exceeding budget again. Contractual allowances, again, very good numbers in terms of contractual allowances, 11.5 million net patient revenue, exceeding our budgeted net patient revenue. And then other operating revenue exceeding also fairly significantly, getting us to total operating revenue of 6, almost 11.7, almost $1 million over budget. Salaries and wages, total at 7.4 million, below budget, 63.3% of total operating revenue versus the budget of 74.7%. Tracking in the right direction. The remainder of the expenses, again, two big variance areas or three big variance areas: physician contracts, rentals and leases, and expenses, bringing us to a net income consolidated on a consolidated basis, 576,000 positive versus the budget of 1 million negative. Next page, page 8, breakdown of Wildflower Court monthly basis, gross revenue at 1.5 million. Reductions from revenue, 241,000, so net patient revenue, 3 million. Salaries and wages, still pretty high contract labor, so we're working on that. That's gonna go down. Employee benefits at 175, so total salaries and wages at 66% of total operating revenue. And other expenses added in, pretty insignificant, but gets us to 952,000 in total expenses and income from operations and total net income both at $368,000 on a year-to-date basis. 1.1.
Joe, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, we talked about the administrative overhead not being in here, but I don't see the food costs in here. Is that part of that? What would normally be allocated? Am I missing something?
It's in materials and supplies.
materials.
It's material and supplies.
Yeah. They've got to do it.
Okay.
Joe, have you done any sort of analysis back in a napkin or otherwise, what a percentage of overhead allocation would be for Wildflower?
I tried to pencil what happened with all the square footage. It's something that we've struggled with. We're in the process of closing out the cost report, and so we should know those numbers soon. Something else that will come out and as we get our daily rate, our per expense per day from that, we're gonna have to increase our rates probably. Just so you guys are aware. Because you know how the state plays the lesser of either your costs or your rates. We need to make sure our rate exceeds our costs. And so we've already a portion of the year, so our rate's gonna have to increase beyond our costs at this point. Make sure we're not leaving money on the table. We are in our rates in here.
Virtually all Medicaid, so I mean, the impact of patients is.
Negligible.
Sure.
Some ratio analysis on page 9. And you can see that by and large, we're doing very well. Cut ratio at 3.39. Days in accounts receivable is 64 versus our median at 48. 64 is still not a bad number. But we're 75, I'd be concerned at 64. While we've got room to improve, working in the right direction. Cash on hand, 100 days. Ready margin, obviously positive, excess margin positive. Average age of the plane.
Back over 100 days of cash, that's good to see.
Sir. And our debt to capitalization at 55.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've looked at these ratios month after month that I've been here, and I'm always at the finance committee meeting, and I see some of these that don't look, I mean, just from the information here, they don't look fair. They're supposed to be above and below. I've never heard anybody until now give some interpretation for these ratios that are unfavorable. So your reading is some of these ratios that are unfavorable are not that bad. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I think that a lot of hospitals struggle with the same things that we're struggling with. And again, on days of accounts receivable, I see a lot of hospitals that their target is about 60. So we're not too far off of that.
What would you think is the worst number on worst ratio for us?
After you answer, I get to answer too.
He was, I mean, that's not great, but it's not horrible. I would say, I'd like to see our average days cash on hand be at 180 plus. So that would be, those would be the two things that would pop out at me first.
Thank you.
Average age of plant is the number that bothers me the most on here.
Those are the two that were on my list.
Yeah, and it's because it speaks to the fact that we're gonna have some big capital costs in the future and how we're gonna fund that, right? Because we just can't, hospitals live on having toys that doctors like to use. So when it's,
Necessities, they're
When
not
it's-
toys.
yeah, I know. I'm just saying, when they get old and it just means we've got a bunch of deferred replacement costs we gotta figure out.
I think both of your answers though tie together to what the problem is though, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
we're gonna need the cash to replace the capital. Right now, we don't have it. We need to rebuild our reserves so we can start
Yeah.
reversing the hospital.
Yeah. The days in ARs continued to come down too. I mean, I can't remember. Hal, do you remember what it was last? But it seems like it's come down again, right?
I don't remember the
It was at
specific.
66, so it was down to 2.5 days, I think that's last we're still going at it. But even when you start getting to the low 60s, high 50s, I mean, you're starting to get into where a lot of hospitals just exist in that area.
Yeah.
You know, how we collect self-pay is kind of, our self-pay policies will keep us higher than some of the other entities that are in the baseline for.
You're right. It was 66.2 last month. So
I'll give you an off the cuff example. So the hospital that I came from before I came here, when I started working there, their AR days were in the 90s. When I left, they were about 65. So, you know, I think that 60 is a good target.
yeah.
Even though it says in here that our Moody's median is 48, I think 60 is a good target for us.
Thank you. Okay.
Next page, page 10 of 17. Your rolling income statement. I don't know how you've handled these in your past finance committee meetings, but
Normally we just, you know, when you get past the last page you just did, it's more, are there questions about, you know?
I think I would just roll through it and say, you know, kind of up and down, but I mean, you can see as we've discussed, our inpatient revenue is down, our inpatient revenue is down from the prior month, but still, you know, you get that 3% change just based on the number of days in the month. Your net revenue, again, I'm very impressed with your net revenue. Percent's really strong.
Here. Chair, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
So as we roll into the 13th month after we've opened Wildflower Court, something will change with this report. This is only hospital at this point for comparison purposes. We'll go to like an organizational wide 13 rolling months in the future. So it'll look different. And that's intentional because now we have a good comparison for 13 months for the whole entity.
Gotcha.
Next page, I have to apologize in advance. Some of the formulas are wrong in the right-hand column, so so your change from year to year is good and bad. Some of those are wrong, but you can see where we've been based on the numbers.
Thank you, Sharon. There's two different versions of the balance sheet. I need the wrong answer.
Not the wrong one. This is the revised, so this has the correct numbers.
You see our cash going up.
The change isn't right, though, still.
Yeah, that's the change column is the column on the right. That's
Yeah.
that's the bad column.
Yeah, the online version's the same as this one.
The difference between the two reports that we had uploaded was accrued payables. The first time it got downloaded, there was some stuff that had posted in NoTech, so there were some errors in it.
I got it.
Page 12, the rolling balance sheet. That's pretty low. Page 13.
Yeah, I think you just opt questions at this point if you want to.
I did mention to Max that I pulled some statistics for the month of October. It looks like it's going to be a lot stronger in September, so that's positive.
Yeah, that's really positive.
So 13 is inpatient statistics. Page 14 is outpatient statistics. I said earlier that, I think the biggest shortfalls in our outpatient statistics were the radiology areas. Page 15 is representation of Wildflower Court, health and hospice, enhanced performance.
I asked Chuck before the meeting if we could start seeing this on a month and year-to-date basis going forward for the hospice and home care, and so he's going to work on that for us.
Home health and hospice always been tough areas. I think we really need to strive to get to break even. Page 16 of 17, you can see that we're down another 16 on total FTEs with travelers. Without travelers. So,
Hal?
Yeah, so I'm trying to keep this number in my head, how many people we have working in the hospital. And of course, this graphic shows, the blue shows the FTE equivalent, as I understand it. But when I was looking at the little mail out that went out to Juneau, it says that we have 769 employees. So that's not FTE equivalents. But can you help me reconcile in my own mind, what's the difference between this number, 769 and 6?
The 769 is actually bodies walking around. And so when you take an FTE equivalent, the body won't, like, you have to take part-time, so the part-times reduce the FTE in equivalency. And casual, such.
But those numbers really are really that many. 50 people who are just part-time.
Part-time or casual status, yes.
and you may have casual employees that are on the books that are actually still employees of the hospital that work 1 day a month.
How long can they go without working before they drop? It's
90 days.
90 days, yeah. So we can have casuals on for quite a while, being that 769 for that.
I have a question about this too. So, we had some improvement in the very front end of the year, December, January, February, in terms of the, what's the gap, the closer the gap is, that means we're really reduced our travelers as we're bringing the traveler number. So we've got, this month we're at 40, last month we were at 40 is the gap. Where do you see that trending, Joe? Are we going to start seeing some of those travelers go off and benefit, because those are high costs,
So the
right?
problems we've had is as we've had travelers drop, we've had to add others, right? So Ian was technically employed, but now we have travelers and travelers, so we have a +1 for him. We've
Yeah.
had some other transitions where we brought other support staff in to help with travelers.
Yeah.
Like we have assistants in IT as a traveler, we have Deb helping, so we've had some people who've had to pull in. So that will start dropping off as well, so we'll see that number hopefully start coming back down.
Hopefully, let's think about realistically though, are we kind of hitting a landing spot in terms of the number of travelers that we're going to have around here? Or do you think no?
So if I may,
Yeah.
Chair, we are working with an additional vendor that has, I think, a better platform to transition people from traveler to permanent status. I spoke with the controller up in Nome, who's a friend of mine. They've had some really good success up there of bringing people in, travelers, and transitioning them at no cost to the organization. So I do expect this number to continue to come down. That is the goal. When I look back at before I got here, I was looking at the numbers. We were running roughly around anywhere from 17 to 25 travelers consistently, a few years back. And then now we've kind of trended up to this like right around 40 range. So I'd like to see us get back down to that 20 or less range.
Great, I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's my target.
That's John Strickler? Yeah. So they've had some success up there transitioning.
They have, and so this organization that we're looking to partner with, that's their philosophy is they're looking for people that are coming that would like full-time employment in Alaska, but they're just
Okay, folks, so we're gonna be continuing our meeting here. It looks, I look a little ghoulish.
This doesn't look like a finance committee
Yeah.
meeting anymore. That's all I'm gonna
We're
say.
having a seance now. We're gonna we're gonna continue with our meeting here. And so if everybody could just speak up, I'm not sure what the situation is with microphones, so just for purposes of recording the people online. Chuck, we're just transitioning to page 17.
Yeah, so last page of page 17. Additional savings. See that we've actually got about 700,000 and 750,000 travelers to 963,000. So our savings continues to increase over the prior month. Still headed in the right direction.
Okay,
That is all the financial reports that are available.
okay. I did have just a couple of other questions, but before Deborah, Shelley, okay. So I'm just, if you would give us an update on the implementation, where we are and what your timeline is for that.
So with respect to the implementation of NetSuite, really this past week has really been a kickoff week. We've had 3 design meetings, so we're designing some of the basic functions right now. The entire implementation will take between 3 and 4 months. So we're probably looking at sometime in February to be up and off.
Okay, great. And the audit, where do we stand with the audit?
Final stages. I've got just a couple of answers to get back to the auditors on various questions, and then it should be complete. Hoping to have it done.
Great, that's good to hear. So is the interfund reconciled? Did we get a?
Yeah, it was reconciled in late September, I think.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah.
Good, all right. Any issues that you're aware of?
I don't see them. Well, there was one variance that I want to bring to finance's attention. So when we opened home health for the hospice, we assumed that we would bill from the date of service. But since when we had our survey, there were conditions of participation that we did not meet. So that moved the effective date of our enrollment to when we actually met the conditions of participation. So there's some billable services that we had thought we would collect on that turns out we won't for that. And we had gone through a appeal process. We finally got our denial on our appeal. And so that you'll see some reverse it. We'll have to take some revenue off of last year. It's uncollectible at this point.
And how much is that?
I think when we get the letter yesterday, so Chuck's probably, have you got a chance to look at that yet, Chuck?
I haven't. I asked Tammy this morning if she can get me some numbers.
Yeah.
Relative to quantify the amounts that would have to be written off. I haven't gone back to that yet. But we'll get that shortly.
Part of the problem is reporting that Matrix Care has been a bear. And so it's just been a struggle. I know Chuck's been getting in there and getting some reports, but it's not the best system for reporting from my perspective. But
yeah. Great. And it has Blessy left?
no, she's still working remotely.
Okay.
So she's helping out in audit. She's done a bunch of the cost report stuff too.
Well, make sure you tell her how much we appreciate her coming back in to help out. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
I tell her all the time.
Yeah, well, tell her from us as well. So that's great. The seance is over. Do I need to do anything different, Sharon? Not quite done yet. I just meant now that we're back online. Yeah, we have an audit RFP from Joe.
So the on RFP, they actually got the RFPs ready and prepped. And so when the intent is to send it out in January. So when we got that information from the city, I asked who would be on the committee who does the evaluation process. They had set the committee as the 2 elected chairs from finance, which would be Christine Wall and the GST chair. So there was no board members from Bartlett who approved the process. I had submitted a request asking if we, the acting CFO, CEO, and 2 board members could do our evaluation for our office. And that's these Angie Flick's responses, she'd take that to the manager and the mayor for consideration. I had that on my agenda item to ask, not the mayor, Katie. So when I meet with Katie and Rob next, I'm asking them, what's the deal? Yeah, I'm trying to do that, at least a voice in the process.
So just so I understand, so what I'm hearing from you is that there's going to be one committee that's going to be doing the selections for the three different, because there's three audit RFPs, right? City,
Yeah.
school district, and hospital, right?
Yeah, they kind of,
And
and
there's-
yes, I was confused by that too when they sent it out. So we had set ours completely separate from theirs. Something we had different requirements and everything.
Yeah. And there's going to be the proposal is that a school board member would be involved in selecting the hospital auditors.
Information they submitted. So I'll sit down with Katie and see if we can maybe before they actually get posted, since it doesn't go the rest of January, hopefully we get that change.
So this was on our agenda. Can we forward a formal request from the finance committee to the board? If assuming the other people on the committee feel the same as I do, that we strongly feel that the hospital board should, or I shouldn't say the hospital board, but hospital management board, be directly involved in selecting the hospital auditors.
I'll get
We-
them drafted over to you for review and get added to the.
And add it to our minutes.
board.
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
would
definitely.
one of you make that as a motion?
Sure. I move that, I recommend, or I move that the finance committee request the full board to reach out to the
To-
CBJ leadership and assembly to include hospital administration and or board members in the selection process for the Bartlett Regional Hospital audits selection.
I second.
Great. We can, when we get the draft minutes, we'll just iron out the language on that for sure. Okay. Thank you for that, Joe. I'm glad you brought that to our attention. That's kind of concerning, honestly. I mean, if we're going to have this big change in auditors, it seems like the hospital should have some involvement in that. But, yeah, all right. Committee comments and questions. Deb?
I have none.
Dylan?
None.
I don't either. We don't have the date of our next meeting on here though, do we? Or is it on here? Let's see. So it would be December.
December 13th.
Friday the 13th.
Okay, so does that still work for you two guys? Does, okay, Bartlett, let me just get that on my calendar. Okay. All right. Oh, I've lost my connection to the internet. No wonder nothing's working suddenly. Okay, with that, is there anything else? We're adjourned. Thank you very much. Not a record, but pretty close to it.
Thank you.